Alignment with body and mind. This is something I don't necessarily talk about frequently, but I think it's important. It's an important topic. That is, at some point, we will start to realize that the physical boundaries that are perceived are really an overlay produced by the mind or by thought, by non-conceptual thought. This could be described as the sense of subject-object disappearing, and then even beyond that, the sense of form, distance, perception, physical reality disappearing as well. That may sound kind of radical or wild or whatever, but it does happen. This realization does proceed to that degree. What's interesting is that as that part is happening, as the sense of separation, the sense of boundaries, and then the sense of form, perception, perceptual distance, and so forth start to dissolve, we often, not always, often will have some kind of recoil or fear response or some sense of loss, or really recoil, I guess is the best word. It's something that feels like it's trying to pull back inward or pull away from that experience, even though you know you can't, even though the realization itself is demonstrating through realization that that's not a possibility anymore. There's still a tendency to do it, or some sensation of wanting to pull back, pull away, go into some inner world. Really, it's like an escape. Something's trying to escape. And you see that you can't do that, of course. And the reason I wanted to make this video is just to explain that if that's happening for you, if you're feeling that kind of dysphoria along with the non-dual realization that's dawning, it's okay. Give it some time. What ultimately will happen is that it will be seen clearly that that sense of recoil, that tendency to recoil, is really just dissociation. That's all it is, essentially. It's even though we don't believe the thoughts anymore, and even though we can see now that physical distance and physical separation and physical boundaries don't actually exist in the actual, we see that, and again, we know that thoughts aren't real and so forth. The tendency to try to utilize thought or try to utilize that thought space, the ability to pull back into an inner world, will still be there. The tendency can be there for a while. And the dysphoria or discomfort or fear, all it really is the tendency. And it will become clear that that's what's happening at some point. You'll realize oh, okay. And it's not even like you have to actively counteract that tendency. The tendency will just subside. And when it subsides, what replaces it is this really beautiful sense of intimacy, this beautiful sense of always home right here, even though there is no actual home, and there's really just transient nature, endless flux. There's also just this, and this sense of wholeness, the sense of completeness, the sense of everythingness becomes very satisfying, becomes very grounding. It's just being grounded in emptiness, being at home in endless, intimate formlessness. What you realize is that actually there's so much more intimacy available in formlessness than there is in the illusion of form. I think that's what I really want to say here, is that can be rather surprising, but it's definitely the case. There's so much more intimacy, so much more interconnection, so to speak. Not that there are objects to connect, but it has that visceral feel, and there's so much more available, so much more connection, intimacy, contact available in boundlessness than there ever was in the world that seemed bounded. There's so much more intimacy in formlessness than there ever was in the world that seemed like it was formed. The world that seems formed seems cut up, distanced, divided into a sense of a self in the center and everything else in some kind of array in relation to the self that we have to either keep away or try to pull toward us, right? Desire and aversion, all of that comes from that sense of separation. And I don't know if I can even explain it logically or explain it with a mental model. I don't think I can, but I can tell you that the intimacy available in formlessness is far beyond the intimacy available with form, with the illusion of form. Maybe it's just because the illusion is dispelled. In truth, in unfiltered reality, there is a rightness that arises and a clarity that arises, but an unmistakable, distinct knowing of connection, of intimacy is the word I always come to because I just don't have a better word for it. Maybe I'll create one, but it has that always here experience, this, I could say, feminine experience. And it's beautiful and it's infinitely flexible as well. That's the other beautiful part of this. There's not this like background fear all the time that it's going to disappear, because it can't disappear because it's not in the world of form. So it doesn't come and go. There's no entry or exit point. And now the mind and body are in balance because the mind has settled. The sense of trying to use the mind to pull back into some dissociative state, right? To create some inner world that doesn't exist, to try to create an inner world to oppose an outer world. None of that's necessary, and the mind will calm down, and that tendency to dissociate will calm down, and that's when the intimacy that's always here, actually, comes forward and really starts to bloom. It's beautiful.